Quantum leaders, the Maverick. Consciousness as architect, not bystander. The Maverick's natural style, fluid, independent, and disruptive, might seem allergic to architecture. But quantum leadership reframes this entirely. Architecture is not about rigidity. It's about consciousness shaping form. The Maverick doesn't inherit systems. They question, disassemble, and often reject them. But what they may not always see is that in doing so, they're still building, just with invisible blueprints. Every challenge they issue, every boundary they test, every experiment they launch is a design act. They don't just push against reality, they recode it through observation, intent, and presence. With a motivation direction of away from, the Maverick often orients around what must be escaped: conformity, repetition, suppression. But this escape isn't neutral, it's formative. Their resistance doesn't just react to constraint, it creates the field in which alternatives can be born or never stabilized. When their consciousness is purely oppositional, their systems fragment. But when they shift into conscious creation, what do I want to exist instead? Their rebellion becomes design. They begin architecting difference, not just highlighting dysfunction. Their attention focus on self gives them sovereignty, but it also makes their internal reality the epicenter of influence. The Maverick often works solo and thinks independently, assuming their personal consciousness is self-contained. But in truth, it radiates. The tone they carry, disenchanted, inspired, curious, agitated, becomes the frequency that reshapes their environment. They're not isolated from the field, they generate it. Their internal tempo becomes the rhythm of change itself. With an internal frame of reference, they trust their gut over external signals. But that gut is also architecture. The Maverick's assumptions about power, structure, or limitation become the scaffolding for what they'll build or reject. If they believe every system is corrupt, they may unconsciously recreate chaos in the name of freedom. If they believe emergent design is possible, they begin building with flexibility and integrity. Their inner architecture becomes the meta-system. Their options-based operational style resists fixed paths, but every choice they make, even to pivot, resist, or delay, is encoded. The Maverick may think they're avoiding architecture by staying fluid, but fluidity is a form. Unstructured does not mean unshaped. When they bring intention to their freedom, designing movement rather than reacting, they create adaptive systems that flex with intelligence, not just velocity. The general viewpoint gives them wide lens perception. They see themes before structure. But quantum leadership invites them to see themes as structure. Patterns aren't just noticed, they're chosen. If they focus on breakdown, dissonance, or threat, those patterns will perpetuate. But when they start naming coherence, synchronicity, or creative thresholds, their themes begin building neural pathways across the system. Their perception becomes a scaffolding of possibility. Their solo work preference gives them the freedom to roam and build unencumbered. But solitude isn't a void, it's a forge. Every thought, every intuitive flash, every private insight they don't dismiss becomes design material. The Maverick creates architecture in silence, coding possibility through focused presence. When they trust the intensity of their solitude and infuse it with awareness, their designs emerge not just novel, but necessary. With dissociated emotional engagement, they often lead with detachment, avoiding emotional noise. But the system still picks up the signal. Their dispassion may be mistaken for irrelevance. Their irritation may become contagion. Quantum consciousness doesn't require emotional flooding. It requires emotional awareness. When Mavericks begin seeing emotional tone as part of their creative medium, they design with depth and magnetism, not just edge. As mismatchers, they instinctively look for what's off or outdated. But mismatch itself is a construction. The more they define themselves by opposition, the more they stabilize what they claim to resist. Conscious architecture means they begin choosing which systems to refine, which to dismantle, and which to reimagine altogether. Their genius isn't in endless critique, it's in conscious contrast. They architect by emphasizing the evolutionary edge, not just erasing the past. With an in-time orientation, they move in bursts, reacting to the moment. But time is not just something they move through, it's something they shape. Their timing becomes a design tool. Do they intervene too early, causing friction, or too late, when change calcifies? When they attune to the timing within the moment, Their actions gain leverage. They don't just disrupt, they synchronize with the tipping point. And with a primary drive of activity, the Maverick is always building, moving, breaking, doing. But action alone doesn't transform a system. The quality of consciousness during action determines whether that system fragments or evolves. Every prototype, every move, every refusal becomes a form of design. The Maverick isn't a passive disruptor. They are a shadow architect. And when they become aware of this role, when they bring intention to the very rebellion they embody, they don't just challenge the system. They rewrite its code from the inside out. In this view, the Maverick is no longer a chaotic outsider. They are a consciousness in motion, shaping new worlds not with blueprints and bureaucracy, but with presence, discernment, and catalytic attention. When they embrace the truth that they are always building, even through resistance, they step into their most refined power. Not as a reaction, but as an origin. Quantum leaders, the Maverick. Polarity creates the blueprint of experience. The Maverick's natural style, unpredictable, autonomous, and fiercely inventive, embodies polarity even as it resists structure. To lead quantumly, the Maverick must come to see that polarity isn't limitation, it's leverage. Every time they challenge a system, they activate its opposing force. Every time they create disruption, they also invite reordering. This principle teaches that Mavericks aren't just surfing chaos. They are conducting a living tension between rebellion and resonance. And that tension, when held with awareness, becomes the blueprint for transformation. With a motivation direction of away from, the Maverick pushes off from sameness, authority, and confinement. The polarity here is freedom versus integration. Too much freedom, and they float, never landing long enough to root change. Too much integration, and they risk entrapment. But when Mavericks consciously hold both poles, asserting their sovereignty and allowing momentary alignment, they become more than escape artists. They become systemic shapeshifters, flowing between resistance and recalibration with precision. Their attention focus on self centers them in personal truth, but polarity reveals the tension between self-direction and collective impact. Mavericks flourish when they're aligned with their own rhythm, but their power multiplies when they remember that they're also part of a field. Holding both autonomy and awareness of system response lets them influence from within without being absorbed. It's not either or. It's solo clarity with systemic consequence. With an internal frame of reference, the Maverick's compass is unshakable. But polarity lives between conviction and evolution. Their inner truth must stay alive, capable of refinement. When they anchor into core values while allowing new insight to update those values, their guidance system becomes more than defiance. It becomes ethical innovation. Their options-based operational style is all about possibility. But polarity lives here between boundlessness and coherence. Too many options without a through line create scatter. Too much direction kills play. Mavericks mature when they design movement within form, freedom that folds into purpose. Like jazz musicians, they improvise with structure, riffing inside a system they've tuned themselves. Their general viewpoint helps them see trends, themes, and patterns, but polarity invites them to bridge the macro and micro. Mavericks often skip details out of boredom or irrelevance, but precision is what grounds vision. When they toggle between zooming out and leaning in, tracking both the theme and the thread, they build innovations that don't just inspire but actually function. Their solo work preference gives them creative control, yet polarity arises as solitude versus connection. Isolation fuels originality, but relationships scale it. When Mavericks oscillate between visionary solitude and collaborative cross-pollination, their ideas sharpen and expand. True Mavericks aren't loners. They're timing-sensitive collaborators who know when to enter and when to retreat. With dissociated emotional engagement, Mavericks stay cool under pressure. The polarity is detachment versus embodied emotion. Too much detachment breeds distance. Too much identification clouds judgment. The Maverick's mastery lies in holding tension, feeling just enough to access timing, tone, and human nuance without becoming engulfed. This makes them not just bold, but impactful. As mismatchers, Mavericks reflexively challenge what's accepted. Polarity here is resistance versus resonance. Too much resistance leads to rejection for its own sake. But when they also tune into what's almost right, what's incomplete but evolving, They gain access to transformative refinement. They become not just disruptors, but editors of reality. Their in-time orientation keeps them attuned to the now. But the polarity here is instinct versus foresight. Pure present moment action generates heat, but may lack continuity. When mavericks hold both, moving intuitively while tracking emerging direction, they become navigators of unfolding timelines, not just reactors to the moment. And with a primary drive of activity, the maverick thrives on kinetic expression. The polarity lives between movement and stillness. Too much motion creates exhaustion and misses integration. Too much stillness risks inertia. The maverick learns to move when the field opens and wait when it contracts. They stop chasing momentum and start generating it. Their activity becomes deliberate, not just expressive, but directional. In this design, polarity is not an obstacle. It's the raw material of innovation. The maverick doesn't need to resolve every tension. They need to hold it, ride it, build from it. And when they do, they stop being the outsider, the lone resistor, the eccentric mind. They become a living axis, bridging the wild and the wise, the edge and the core, the new and the now. Mavericks don't tame polarity, they architect with it. And that's what makes them not just rebels, but quantum leaders. Quantum leaders. Quantum entanglement, the thread between all things. The maverick's natural style. Freeform, provocative, and iconoclastic, appears on the surface to operate independently of systems. They often thrive by breaking patterns rather than nesting within them. Yet under the principle of quantum entanglement, their leadership is radically recontextualized. Nothing they disrupt stands alone. Every deviation, every act of resistance, every innovation they push into motion is connected, energetically and structurally, to the larger field. They are not just edge dwellers, they are field influencers. Their movements ripple far beyond intention. With a motivation direction of away from, the maverick instinctively pulls back from rigidity, compliance, or stagnation. But entanglement warns, what they reject, they still interact with. What they push away, they often empower through energetic focus. A rebellion launched from frustration may reinforce what it attempts to dismantle. True maverick leadership begins when they ask, what unseen system am I still feeding by how I'm reacting? They move from reactivity to relational authorship, rewiring from within, not just attacking from without. Their attention focus on self protects authenticity, but entanglement makes it clear. Even their internal state is not isolated. What they believe about themselves, whether too much, not understood, or ahead of their time, filters through their output and into the system. That energy affects how teams respond, how ideas land, and how resistance shows up. When mavericks become aware of the energetic thread between their self-concept and their influence, they no longer just defend their identity. They refine it as a tuning device for collective evolution. With an internal frame of reference, mavericks rarely look outside for direction. Yet entanglement reframes inner certainty. Their inner state becomes an unspoken transmitter. Cynicism leaks, hope leaks, even silence shapes tone. They can no longer afford to treat inner monologue as private. It's part of the field. When they carry fierce clarity and systemic attunement, their presence becomes catalytic, not chaotic. Their options-based operational style gives them full range to experiment. But quantum entanglement shows every experiment ripples. An abandoned project creates echoes of instability. A spontaneous pivot can unsettle timelines or affect morale. Mavericks evolve when they track not just their freedom to act, but the invisible contract each action creates. What are they promising through movement? What threads are being pulled when they choose chaos or clarity? The answer to these questions becomes the foundation of their integrity. Through their general viewpoint, they track patterns and themes across time and space, but entanglement invites them deeper, into subtle transmission, a tone of voice in a meeting, a cryptic Slack message, a half-finished pitch. These aren't just artifacts, they're field activators. Mavericks often underestimate their energetic charge, but once they see themselves as emotional and informational transmitters, they can wield their communication with nuance, not just boldness. Their solo work preference protects creative flow. Yet entanglement reveals, even in isolation, they are shaping the group field. Their absence speaks. Their silence affects decisions. Their progress, or stagnation, sends signals through the web. When mavericks realize that even solitude is participatory, they begin cultivating their space not just for innovation, but for resonance. Solitude becomes sacred attunement, not just escape. With dissociated emotional engagement, mavericks often maintain composure amid emotional intensity. But even their detachment creates a field. What others interpret, aloofness, mystique, dismissal, may or may not reflect intent. Entanglement challenges them to refine their emotional signature. How do they want to feel into the field? Not by becoming emotionally exposed, but by becoming emotionally precise. When their tone aligns with their intent, their impact becomes exponentially cleaner. As mismatchers, they're wired to challenge. But entanglement reveals that critique doesn't just stop at resistance, it leaves residue. Constant rejection of structure may dishearten those trying to improve it. Relentless inversion creates fatigue. Mavericks grow when they learn to mismatch with purpose, not to invalidate, but to highlight potential alternatives with clarity. When their opposition becomes coherent, their entanglement deepens into influence. Their in-time orientation keeps them present and reactive. But entanglement expands their sense of time. The now isn't just now. It's connected to what came before and what emerges after. A comment made in a flash can echo for weeks. A misaligned decision can ripple for quarters. The maverick becomes multidimensional when they hold presence and consequence, timing that is not just reactive, but relational. And with a primary drive of activity, mavericks pulse energy into the system through constant motion. But entanglement transforms activity from output to transmission. What are they embedding into the structure through that action? Speed, rebellion, genius, confusion? Mavericks evolve from kinetic creators into entangled architects when they act with full awareness of the field their movement activates. They stop scattering energy and start infusing presence into every change. In this quantum light, the maverick becomes not a rogue agent, but a field tuner. Their very presence edits the system. Their every choice creates a signature ripple. And when they begin to honor that entanglement, not to censor themselves, but to harmonize their impact, they become transformational leaders, not just shapers of innovation, but curators of coherence. In this way, the maverick moves from disruption to design, from rebellion to refinement, and becomes the energetic edge of collective evolution.